I think everyone is coming in. Nice to see everyone. Okay. Okay, I'm going to assume everybody's in the room now. And I want to welcome everyone to the first session of CASC, the first session in our program. And our focus here is creating space for economic reconciliation. I first want to comment on the fact that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and the home of the METIS as University of Alberta. And this is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Métis, the Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwa, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. And you may want to enter your own land acknowledgement, if you wish, in the chat box. We also want to recognize that this is National Indigenous History Month. And in addition to recognizing the Indigenous peoples on whose lands our institutions are situated all across Canada, we also need to acknowledge the confirmation last week of the burial site on the grounds of the former Kamloops Indian Residential School of 215 children. While it is difficult to imagine the pain and grief that their families and communities are experiencing, we seek to honor their lives by not forgetting their stories. Grief must lead to action, and as we as individuals and members of communities and institutions must summon the will to create a just society, country, and world. Now, what I want to do next is to introduce you to our panel. Our panel consists of Mary Nirlungayuk, who is Corporate Secretary for Arctic Co-op, Louise Champagne, the co-founder of Nietzsche Foods Co-op, and Wanda Wuttunee from the Department of Native Studies at the University of Manitoba. So thank you for being here, panelists. And thank everyone else for being here. We're going to ask each of the panelists to present for about 5 to 6 minutes. And then we're going to have a panel discussion on 3 key questions that I'll give you. And then we'll have some time for audience questions. And I'll just mention the question we have. What creative solutions for economic reconciliation do you bring to the table? So something to reflect on while we're hearing the presentations. So I'm going to ask Mary to share her slides with us at this point.
Blackfoot, Mary Nirlungayuk with Arctic Co-operatives in Winnipeg. Thanks for that introduction, and as well as the acknowledgement of the 215 children that were, in that sense. It's been a hard weekend for a lot of people in the Indigenous area. One of the things that is, it's very fitting with this reconciliation of topics of the from the Arctic perspective, and I'm talking from Inuit perspective. As we know that across Canada, we tend to be called Indigenous, and however being very diverse across Canada, and this is really from the Inuit perspective of my presentation today. Economic reconciliation, Arctic cooperative and Arctic perspective in the 21st century. It took this long to get recognized in the business sense. So I appreciate the having Arctic perspective in this topic today. One of the things I'm looking at it from the Arctic cooperative point of view and the membership in the Arctic Canada, anywhere from Grise Fiord to Sax Harbor to Oak Crow in Yukon and NWT as well. This is our member base and in high Arctic. It's important to acknowledge this as well because they, from the perspective of the business and the diversity, the land mass of the Arctic Canada, I can't emphasize this enough because these are remote, tiny little communities, anywhere from 120, anywhere from 7,500 to Iqaluit. My home community, a little over 1,000 community people in there. So very tiny remote communities, but we're able to do the business. And reconciliation means to us that we've been here from the right from the beginning of the community that were established 60 years ago only. That it hasn't been that long in the Arctic perspective. Recognizing the homeland, that was in the opening from Canadian First Nation to Métis and Inuit. In the Inuit community, the Nunavut tends to be acknowledged in our Inuit language. It's called Nunavut, means our homeland. That's our acknowledgement right from the get-go. In 1999, when it was split from the Northwest Territory region, we were wanting to be acknowledged from the Inuit perspective. So that settlement was created in 1999. So that's just an acknowledgement from there. The governance perspective, Arctic Cooperative has 7 board members. They're from the community, from the region, all regions. I'm going to talk about that shortly. And the representation geographically, the cooperation amongst their 32-member cooperative, and the concern for community. We were there from the beginning. What's important in this acknowledgement is that I didn't realize coming to Southern Canada, and I'm based out of Winnipeg, it was a reversal on my part. I didn't realize Indigenous people in Southern Canada were never there from the beginning. It's reversal on my end. So I have to adjust at my thinking sometimes to get to where it needs to be. The cooperative movement really had started from the arts. That was about 60 years ago. And the arts became important, the carvings and the drawings and the wall hangings. Winnipeg Art Gallery just launched a Kaumayuk. This is part of the rich history that Inuit has. This is part of the reason why the cooperative movement in Canada started. I mean, in the Arctic Canada. The membership base in the Arctic, our members are in the tiny communities. They elect the 7 board members on Arctic Cooperative. We have a district support advisor that advises between the board members in the community and the general manager. They're in businesses in retail, hotel, arts and craft. Some locations have fuel distribution. And the other thing is cable services and other services. We tend to partner with from the airline to resupply, various partnership that whoever we can partner with. Banking services, not every community has banking services. That's another area that we partner in from that perspective. So, but in the org chart, it's members, always members at the beginning. Cooperative governance, this is huge on our end. Our members, because Arctic Cooperative is owned by the 32-member location, but the members at the member co-op communities, they own these independent 32-member cooperatives. They have membership, they have their own board members, as well as annual meetings once a year, like the cooperative movement, that they use the 7 principles as well. That's organizational chart. As you see in these photos, voting on every decision that is made on behalf of the co-op system, we can't go forward without their approval. So as a co-op system, that's how democratic structure works in the member location. They're there from the beginning of the decision making. Early leaders of the co-op system is very vital to us as well. Any business that is being made. This is in Pangnirtung, in the Baffin region. They held their AGM. Just look at their being cooperative, they return back to the membership. This was several years ago. They returned about $256,000 back to economic benefit back into the community. This is huge for the individual. And this community is about 1,800. For 1,800 people, that's huge on the economic return back into the being a cooperative system from that perspective. The other thing that I do want to cover is being a cooperative. They're in 21st century, they have retails and up-to-date infrastructure. These are the things that are we invest significantly into the community. You'll notice I put this in for a good reason. You notice that the signage program that we have, they're also translated to the language of Inuktitut, making sure that there's a, I know in Canada, we tend to say language of choice in English or French. Okay, what about the rest of our language? That's another thing that we try to integrate into the business aspect. Produce are held, the 21st century of products are there. They are in hotel industries. We call the Ins North brand, up-to-date branding, up-to-date facilities. They own these ones. Arctic Cooperative doesn't own them. The members in individual cooperative owns them. Other businesses that are in the community as well, cable services, petroleum, restaurant and takeout restaurants and building leases, constructions, multi-purpose businesses in the community. These are tiny communities, but they are able to provide these services when they're not available. Investing in people is another one. It's huge on our end. In a small engine repair, like the snow machines, the way of in the community, when you have to get around the community, we don't all have trucks or we don't have vehicles, but small engines, snow machines, ATVs, quads. But who does the repair on those ones? That's one of the trainings we do as well. Anywhere from the restaurants to small engine repair, outboard motors. These are the things that we do in the training aspect. Inclusiveness, how we have to be inclusive, always keeping that in mind, the language and the culture, the celebration, the cultural representation, it has to be there all the time in the sense of when we're doing anything in the community. Culture orientation, part of my job as our corporate secretary, anyone that is going into the Arctic communities on behalf of the member cooperative, I do an orientation. Too often people go into the community and not knowing the culture. It's a reversal of thinking as well as making sure that you're culturally oriented. And I try to emphasize an hour of orientation is not good enough, but it's what we do. I try to cover the culture, the climate, the wildlife, the environment, the fishing, the family as well. As we know, across Canada, Indigenous people and the elders are respected, including the Inuit community. We have to, this is a central point of the culture itself. So we have, one of the orientation is that when you go into the community, acknowledge the elders, because they've been around a lot longer than rest of the people in the community, and they've seen a lot of changes. I put this up here for a reason, and it's a generation where being an Inuk, we carry our babies, they raised in the hood. Raised in the hood term, I know that raised in the hood term is a different term in Southern Canada, but we were actually raised in the hood, growing up in the back of the Amauti. Being relevant, making sure that we try to translate any materials to the language. In Inuktitut, so signage program, we try to translate them as much as possible. One of the things is trying to avoid missteps and common pitfalls before going into the Arctic community is being aware of the culture, the environment, the region you're heading to, because every community is different, and making sure that elders are respected, the harvesting month, the customs and the language itself. So I went through this very quickly. So I think this is my end of my presentation, and any questions, I believe it's going to come in later. So thank you very much, Judith.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, well, I think move right along to Louise and her presentation.
Hello, and thank you, Mary. That was a great presentation. I just want to let you know I'm from the hood too, in southern Canada and Winnipeg. So I am thinking a lot about this term reconciliation, and I think that one of the things that is fundamental about reconciliation is to recognize and acknowledge the damage that's done and that's been done. And I think that's we've really have a long way to go on that front. I appreciate all the acknowledgements that has been happening at the beginning of meetings, and I think that is really an important step, of course, because it makes a huge difference. I know it makes a difference to me when the people acknowledge that they're on Aboriginal land and Inuit land, and that's an important piece to be reminded every time there's a meeting being opened. It means a lot. But I really think the acknowledgement of the damage is really fundamental. And I'm thinking, of course, I'm experiencing a lot of grief about the findings in the residential school that's opened up this week. But I was saying to a friend the other day that I recall as a child being told that there are children buried in the ground around the churches, and I don't think I'm unique to having heard that story. I think there's a lot of Aboriginal people who have heard that story, that there are children buried around the churches. And so to hear this, what strikes me is that what does it take, for the rest of society here to acknowledge this damage? Like, do you have to find the actual remains of people in order to be believed? Because I often felt that even after all of the inquiry and the testimony of the grief and pain people suffered, that were still not believed, and until these remains were turned up. And so this acknowledgement that damage was done, but it also means going a little further to understand what was undermined, what was shifted, and a lot. And I think you have to understand that that Aboriginal populations had economies, healthy, caring and sharing economies that nurtured their communities. And the introduction of this settler community was undermining that on many fronts. And I recall even in my lifetime the concept of development and the concept of economic progress. For example, the development of hydro and the in Manitoba, and the relocating the Churchill River diversion, it was called, back in the 70s. Well, I witnessed, at least I had an opportunity to fly over that area, and I recognized that the incredible damage that was done to the fishing industry and the hunting, and it just totally undermined people's livelihood. And then this was seen as progress, and so I think a whole rethinking of what was damaged, and also on that basis moving forward to recognize, how do you repair this damage? What is it that you have to do? And I think some of the questions that you're posing are really steps in a positive direction to have people think about what was damaged and where do we go forward. The other point I wanted to make about what's positive change that's going on, along with the acknowledgements that you're on Aboriginal land, but also the fact that a lot of young people that I've met over the number of years who are really doing their homework, and they refer to themselves as coming from a settler culture, and to me that's really impressive and significant that people acknowledge that where they're positioned in this relationship with the rest of the world, you know, that there's this settler historic experience, and as a result of that, it impacts how you relate with the world, and young people are beginning to acknowledge that, and I think that's really, really positive. I'm not mindful of the time, but I think I'll stop at this point and give somebody else a chance. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Louise, for that. Okay, I think we'll move on to Wanda, Wuttunee.
Good morning, Tanse Nina Waktan Mktuachiochi. The name my grandmother gave me is Water Lily, and I'm of the Eagle people of the Eagle Hills, Treaty 6, Red Pheasant Cree Nation, currently on Treaty 1 territory and home of the Métis. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm so glad to hear Mary and Louise, and my thoughts go out to Priscilla. She's ill and she's not able to join us. I got an email just before we started. So my topic that I was asked to share on is social economy. And so what I did was, I'd like to just focus on one example in Manitoba, social economy, looking, of course, at planet, people, culture, and profit in the context of development. And the particular story that I wanted to share from Manitoba is the Indigenous Social Enterprise Aki Innovations Group. And I find them really interesting. Going on their website, it's just a treat. Because of the approach that they're taking. So they define social enterprise as an organization that applies commercial strategies to maximize improvements in financial sustainability, strengthen social impacts to maximize improvement, in support of communities, and environmental well-being by respecting the land. So I like to look at the definitions that our own people have for what they're doing. So that's how they define social enterprise. So I'm pleased to share that. The other thing that they talk about, of course, is what their main purpose is: to promote, encourage, and make social change in each of the communities that they work in. So I think acknowledging that they're change agents, and they say that on their website. They are true community change agents because they listen to communities to help them solve problems, create capacity, and create jobs. Part of the discussion today is about community, and so recognition by this group is, I think, a really important point to share. They also talk about that they are solution providers, and they seek to develop solutions that build opportunities, communities, and enterprises. They published a social enterprise toolkit for a solutions economy targeting First Nations. And in that report that came out in 2015, they talk about looking at the upside of down. So their examples were the downside, okay, we see high unemployment in our communities. The upside is we have a great available workforce. Downside, high food costs. But that gives, the upside is a good margin to harvest and sell local food. Another downside that they point out is high utility bills. But this increases the cost-effective green energy options that are available. That in they have several groups under the innovation group, and one is called Aki Energy and the other is Aki Foods. So Aki Energy is looking at that green energy options. So they're looking to make impact in the communities, and those impacts we know really ripple out into outside of their communities as well, for the rest of the province and the region. So a little bit more about Aki Energy. It started in 2013, and their focus is on green energy, so geothermal energy, solar thermal energy, biomass energy, and commercial lighting efficiency. And so they talk about on their website, pardon me, I think it was in their toolkit. They talk about a partnership that they had with Peguis and with Fisher River Cree Nation, 2 communities in northern Manitoba, where they installed probably a total of, there's about 260 geothermal units installed in the communities, where they built capacity with the local community to teach them how to do the installation. So they were leaving skills in the community. And with those units, they estimate that there were savings for the community of $50,000 a year for energy costs that they were saving. And of course, that works out to $500,000 over a decade. So quite significant. But again, just remembering that they're really interested in making change in communities so that they are focusing on what the community wants and involving the community from the get-go. The other project that I wanted to highlight, and Priscilla was going to talk about food security. So this is in that area. In Aki Foods, they highlight Meacham project, which is a joint effort with Aki Energy, 4 Arrows Regional Health Authority, partners at the University of Manitoba and Garden Hill First Nation in northern Manitoba. They have really cool videos on their website about how that started, how they involved the youth in food security, and how Garden Hill has a history of looking after their food needs. And this project just builds on that, encourages the youth to be involved in planting and harvesting and addressing food insecurity in the communities. In the toolkit, they highlight a lot of other Indigenous social enterprises that are working on the same kind of premises to make change, to be positive contributors, not dwelling on the problems. I like that looking at the upside of down, looking through the problems to the opportunities and to making healthy communities. Healthy communities, I think, is at the heart of development for Indigenous communities. Healthy and wellness really makes a solid foundation in going forward in development. So I'll leave it there and look forward to further discussion on the panel. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Wanda. And we'll touch base with Priscilla later to see how she's doing. The panel came up with 3 main questions for discussion. So I'm going to give you those 3 questions. What is the role of community? What do inclusivity and economic justice look like? What is Indigenous prosperity? So these are going to be the focus of some additional conversation among the 3 panelists here.
Mary, why don't you start? Kick
Sure.
us off.
Wait a minute. Thank you. Good question. Inclusivity. That's in a lot of ways, I thought Indigenous people in a lot of ways were there, not realizing they were not always part of the discussions of so often in the presentation and various things. We're kind of in a sense of afterthoughts. Okay, we need to include Indigenous people into the various group. Well, inclusivity is, I thought for sure we were, because in the Arctic, when a decision anywhere in the education system, in the housing and the cooperative system, in any committees that are in the community, they're right there. They're part of it. They're part of the decision making. And that's inclusivity. It's not, okay, let's come up with a program, come up with something and then give it to them. It's a reversal on my end. So, and I think prosperity in a lot of ways is that it's a really rich history, a lot of rich culture that we don't always embrace. We've embraced it in our own ways, but we don't embrace it enough in the sense of that I think we need to, the Canadians, rest of Canada has to adapt to the area and start including Indigenous people into the organization in things. And I think we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And I think that inclusivity in the language, the culture, adapt to the various things in the community. Too often there's too imposement. That approach is not working, and we need to make it work in a lot of ways that have people adapt to the Indigenous culture. That's inclusivity. If it's going to be in the language, have interpreters to the English. That's what we do in our AGM. We have interpretation from that perspective. So I think that's part of the things that we could certainly, inclusivity is in a lot of areas. Thank you.
I think inclusivity is a really important principle, of course, and a huge challenge. It's been our experience that it really takes a lot of resources to make meaningful participation and inclusion. In our community, it requires a lot. And for example, you know, there's sort of protocols around running a co-op meeting, and you know, there's rules around running meetings. And when you want people to participate, you can't expect you can't expect raised poor people to sit in long meetings and contribute to decision making that they don't understand. And so there's a lot of changes required around how you do things, but also a tremendous amount of support around providing people with the skills and the knowledge to have some real participation. And I think that requires a lot of resources for supports, like supporting people well is an investment in time and resources, and those need to be figured out. Where is that coming from? And when you're operating a business and you're totally dependent on your sort of commercial sales, and you're trying to grow that business, where are the resources to support people better in participating in a better way, whether they're workers or consumers or general representatives of the community, elders and everybody who needs to have some real participation.
I really appreciate what Mary and Louise have shared. That I think all of us have spoken to how important community is, and Louise's emphasis on, you know, meaningful, authentic inclusion means that you just can't assume people are at the same place. They aren't. And so building on true inclusivity really goes to relationships, I think. And relationships that probably we wouldn't normally think about in development, unless you've come to understand how diverse we are. We are very diverse in terms of understanding basic concepts around what makes a community healthy. I think people understand. One research project that I was in for 7 years with a community north of Winnipeg, it was looking at development, but starting at sort of poverty, coming in the discussion around poverty. So how do we address issues around poverty so that that's not an obstacle to development for the community? And we had a number of community members volunteer to be on a committee to work with us. And immediately they changed the perspective, which looking at the upside of down, poverty is the down, the upside is eo panituak, which is, they changed the whole perspective, and it means helping each other up. So working together and helping each other up flips the idea of poverty on its head, saying, you know, it's not lack, but it's us working together to help each other, caring and sharing, as Louise had mentioned. So I think understanding that we don't have all the answers, that's always been, I think, extremely important. Understanding that communities know what is needed, what the issues are, and what help they need. And Louise's, you know, comment about really supporting people meaningfully, so that there is understanding, and so people can feel comfortable to that they have something to offer and that it's honored and respected, is very critical, I think, moving forward in any kind of process of reconciliation. For me, reconciliation and is making space for everyone to be respected and to be looked to for solutions, looking in places that may seem less obvious. One comment, actually, I was speaking to a friend, because as an academic, we always hear how over-researched our communities are. But his experience was researchers talk to the chiefs and the counselors or the, you know, the leaders of the community. They don't talk to the community members. So the people that are over-researched are the leaders. So that says a lot to me about inclusivity. So it's not necessarily the people that are elected. And in our committee, we had people just from the general community that were really interested in what we were doing, and they stuck it out for 7 years and had like some awesome ideas that we just supported. So it was really great to see. One of the other questions about what is Indigenous prosperity, for me, it's always been because acknowledging how diverse we are and acknowledging that we have to make space for communities to say, what is prosperity? What does it look like? It's not necessarily what mainstream society looks at. It could have elements of it, but you can also have communities that aren't really interested in more development that they already have. So understanding, again, I think diverse perspectives have to start from the community. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Judith, you're muted, Judith.
I don't know if someone else wants to jump in at this point. I mean, I think we've covered these questions. Maybe we have a couple more minutes before we let the audience post some questions. Have we talked, I don't know, maybe we want to talk more about Indigenous prosperity and also economic justice. Louise, I think.
Hi, yes. Couple of things I want to say about reconciliation is that, first of all, just the idea of Indigenous prosperity, I think it is, is it about getting royalties on pipelines? I think it involves more than that. It really is not about that. It's really not to say that's not important. I just want to say that building community-based cooperative economies is about Indigenous prosperity, where based on people's culture and intuitively wanting to take care of each other in communities, that really you've got to rebuild the economies so that it's not dependent on commercial markets and commercial values. When I say that this development strategy the past several hundred years has been focused on developing stealing resources, basically, that's been a total failure for us and for a lot of other people in the world as well. And so reclaiming our cooperative culture is really important, and supporting that process is about reconciliation, and it means stopping the stealing of natural resources, just stopping that, and supporting Indigenous solutions in dealing with the developing source of livelihoods. It really is about supporting Indigenous solutions for that. Yeah. I wanted to just mention Nietzsche Foods and how that ties into reconciliation. Nietzsche was providing a service in the community and selling goods and products. And when people shopped at Nietzsche, it was contributing to establishing or making it possible for a business like that to operate in the region that it was operating in. So I often compared it with, the whole charity model and how it's different. Like the conventional charity model of food banks, for example, people get nice, warm, fuzzy feelings when they contribute to a food bank and they see themselves as feeding people. But the people on the receiving end of that are not receiving food that is a basic human need in any dignified way. And I think it just causes more damage. And yet here's an opportunity to shop at Nietzsche, where you're creating employment and you're getting some good quality products. It's a two-way street. It's not a one-way street as the typical conventional charity model is a one-way street. So I'm kind of all over the place here. As I wanted to mention the importance of a model like Niche Foods, and it creates the opportunity for people to really put their spending. People are spending money on food to begin with all the time, and when they're spending it in establishments like cooperatives, they're contributing to creating employment for people, and moving a step further than a charity model.
Okay, there we go. I know we have about 10 minutes left, and so I want to invite some questions from the audience. And the question that our panel posed for you is, what creative solutions for economic reconciliation do you bring to the table? So that's one thing that you might comment, or you might have other questions. So please, I'm hoping people can speak up as I navigate things here. Maybe you could put a note in the chat box to say you'd like to speak, or put a question in the chat box. And I'll check to see if anybody has their hand up.
Isabel has a question in the chat.
Okay, Isabel, do you want to speak up on this, Isabel?
Yeah, thank you all so much. That was so inspiring because as I listened to you, you so effectively deconstructed and reconstructed those dominant stories that we've all learned about economic modernity. And, you know, you've made so clear what we've lost in the process. That we've lost the incredible achievement of sustainable economies over centuries. And I just wondered if you could say a bit more about what we can learn from Indigenous solutions to understand what we've wasted in all our communities. Thanks. And hi to my dear friends.
Hey, I'm wondering who might want to jump in on that question.
What's interesting with the question in that particular area, I know in the co-op system in the Arctic Canada, when they didn't want to get left behind in the business aspect. So the early leaders really assessed what are the business that will be able to benefit and relevant to the Indigenous culture, the Inuit culture, and so on. And the best model was the co-op system model. It was a decision made early on that really helped the Indigenous people in the Arctic Canada. And I think those strong leaders at the time was forward thinking. That was amazing. It always amazes me that they were forward thinking people that for a younger generation that is now benefiting to those economic benefits to the business. It's really showing in the community. Yes, we could do a lot more. Food insecurity is there. There's a lot of challenge like in any communities. But I think from the perspective, if we had to learn a lot from the perspective of what can we learn from that, use the models that are successful. If we can do it in Arctic Canada, why can't we do it in the rest of the First Nations communities that is across Canada? And I think there's too many challenges that is always posed to that particular area. But in that case, it can get done. It can get done in the rest of the First Nations communities. Thank you.
I just want to mention that one of the things that, of course, was lost was economic balance. and in Indigenous communities prior to settler groups, but it all started with merchant trade. You know, merchant trade spread all over the world. It undermined Africa as well as North and South America. You know, and other parts of the world. So there's a history there of merchant trade that interrupted people. And it's still going on. You know, it's shifted somewhat, but it's still there. And we have to really claim our current sharing and caring culture came from somewhere, and that's really, really important to reclaim that and not be ashamed of it, and liberate ourselves from how important it is to maintain this culture and not let it get undermined. And I often feel that, just sending our children to school undermines that culture. There's so much going on that is undermining that sharing and caring culture that it often feels very, very overwhelming. And I think we need to rebuild not only our local economy, but our national economy and our international economy to really be based on caring and sharing. That's a very healthy, important model to move forward.
There's not much I can add. I really agree with what Louise and Mary have shared on that. For me, I acknowledge, the challenges, but I just really super appreciate the resilience that we have in our communities and our people and our leaders, and the tenacity too that's been expressed over many generations to want to build something worthwhile for individuals, for families, and for communities. And I think the way that Louise expressed about, focusing on sharing and caring in all of our development activities should be at the heart of it. You can see flickers of light and understanding in the general community, but it is just so important to acknowledge to just our resilience in the face of overwhelming challenge. We still survive, and I'm just so appreciative of that.
Do we have any other questions people want to pose? We might have time for one more quick question. I think we have about 3 minutes left, and I think there's so much. I'm trying to think of just one takeaway from all of this. There's so many takeaways from this really rich discussion. And I'm thinking of the idea that sometimes we fail to see how one person can change the whole conversation. And we have to hear those voices of people who can change the whole conversation and turn things upside down for a while so that we entertain all of these positive approaches that we're hearing about today. And basic to all of that, taking care of each other. So I think maybe I'll thank everyone, unless one of the panelists has one more thing that they wanted to add at this point.
I do.
Yeah,
I just want to say that Nietzsche Foods was a model that was trying to take on this sharing and caring culture and applying it to a commercial workspace where we had representation from workers, from customers, and community. And so we went, we were trying to develop this model that could be used to nurture community and the people involved. And I just want to add that Nietzsche hasn't given up. We're still pursuing to reopen and get our building back under our control. That's not happening. I mean, we haven't given up on that direction, and hopefully we'll resurface in bringing the model a little bit further ahead in the future. Thanks.
Well, I'm looking forward to shopping at Michi and getting my blueberries and my bannock, etc. And I want to thank all of the panelists today for focusing on these important issues and giving us very practical information as well during this session. So thanks to all of you, Louise, Wanda, and Mary, for coming to this today. And I wanted to remind people that there's a networking lounge. You can go into the networking lounge if you like after this, click on it and do some chatting there. And our next session is a keynote with Ted Howard at 11 o'clock. So hoping to see all of you there again. So thanks very much. Bye for now, everyone. Take care of each other.